So I wrote this essay in the wake of Charlie Kirk's murder. It's called What is Transgender Really? And I want to read it to you now. This is the first time I've ever read something into YouTube. So I'm going to see how it goes. And also, it was a few, 6 months ago, perhaps. So there have been little areas where my perspective has changed slightly. And when I come across those, I might just interject something, little updates, whatever. Okay, so the essay is What is Transgender Really? And the subtitle is a mouthful, a personal meditation on ancient archetypes, modern politics, and the irony of not being wrong enough. So I'm a 47-year-old man, 48 now, in a time when the question of what makes someone a man or a woman has become an explosive fault line that cuts deep across morality and politics. Many on the left view the right as downright cruel, dehumanizing, narrow minded, and incapable of imagining a meaningful way to live beyond what they see as these impoverished religious frameworks. And those on the right see the left as holding incongruent, insane views that threaten the primordial order woven deep into biological and linguistic structures, which is to say, creation itself. And each side is deeply convinced that the other is illegitimately taking political ground, threatening freedom, and tilting the world towards evil. And on these points, I fear that neither side is wrong enough. So, were I born in the year of Princess Diana's death, which was 1997, instead of Elvis's, which is 1977, in a coastal city instead of a farm town, to progressive parents instead of traditional ones, hi, mom and dad, I might well be living as a woman today. I have never written or spoken publicly about this, fearing the repercussions and misunderstandings that could come at me from every imaginable angle. But it's true. In my childhood and for a significant part of my adolescence, I genuinely wished I was female bodied. Female body is kind of a weird term. Maybe I should just say female. And my hope is that speaking about it now will allow me to offer a fresh perspective on the question of gender in a contemporary context. My intention is to address this very question in a way that points toward, or at minimum, traces the possibility of a healthier way forward. So hopefully this is one that you aren't likely to encounter on TikTok or Instagram, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and the like. Now, I am certainly interested in which position, like the left or the right, is the more defensible one, and I will share my opinions about that through the course of this essay, perhaps all too generously. But that is just one of several concerns I carry. My central concern is the foundational importance of truth, trust, and sacred commitment in the ongoing enactment of social institutions that can flourish, meet the moment, and endure through what we're going through right now: unchecked technological, ecological, geopolitical upheaval, and not to mention the incomprehensible, let me say that, not to mention the incomprehensible systemic changes such upheaval continues to unleash. Wow, I destroyed that sentence. How did we arrive at a place where these meta-contextual imperatives like truth and trust seem utterly absent from our political discourse? And what can we do to restore them? It seems to me that both sides of the political divide are aware of the grave dangers of living in a society where people cannot agree on what is real, don't trust one another, and have no common cause or shared direction. Yet neither side seems equipped to reflect on the ways in which the quality of presence they bring to civic life might be giving rise to those dangers. This is a serious blind spot for everybody, and I include myself in that. In some ways, things were simpler when I was young, which is not to say that disinformation, lack of trust, and conspiratorial sense making didn't have real impacts on people and communities. They definitely did. There's a little footnote in here about the 80s paranoia and panic over the satanic ritual child sacrifices, which turned out to be nothing, it seems, a big nothing burger. So it's not to say that it didn't, that kind of sense making didn't have impacts on people, and nor is it to say that some kids didn't grapple with their sex or their gender. I did. My first memories of doing so include pretending I was the female superhero in my favorite comic book. It was an obscure comic book called Power Pack, by the way. Uh, Doing that, wanting to be the wife when playing house with other kids who typically thought that was weird. Imagining that I was wearing stilettos on the playground. I would imagine my rubber boots were stilettos, actually. And then excitedly telling dad I had discovered I was a Tom girl. And then watching the alarm spread over his face as he asked me where I got that idea from. Begging my parents to take me out of hockey and put me in figure skating after witnessing this graceful and beautiful sport on TV for the first time. And the list goes on. I could go on and on. Normally, I take great care to hide these details from others. I disclose them here, not in the spirit of Augustinian confession, but because I want you to know where I'm coming from. I want you to see that this isn't just theory for me. This is real for me. So, sitting in the guidance counselor's office in grade 4, I was given a questionnaire to fill out, which asked me, oh, these things were, I just cringe thinking about this. But I was given this questionnaire to fill out, which asked me to rank my agreement with a couple dozen statements intended to assess my level of well-being. And I came to one pretty far down the list, which read something like, I am happy being the gender I was born as. And I agonized over that question. I didn't want to lie. I really didn't. But by that point, I was aware of the potential consequences. And I didn't want the counselor, her name was Becky, or any adult to know something that might lead to said consequences. I can't remember with certainty, but I am pretty sure I checked strongly agree. Maybe it was somewhat agree. I don't know. But the issue never got raised after that. And so if there were what we would today speak of as gender affirming, what some people would speak of that, adults in the world I grew up in, I was not aware of any. And today we find ourselves in a very different moment, one that is complicated by a relentless torrent of political and cultural contestation. In today's era, no matter where you're from, you will easily encounter strident advocates for and against trans rights. I said here trans rights as human rights. I think that holds up either way. All you need to do to find those is fire up your favorite social media platform. And on each side of the debate, you'll notice the staunchest, most outrageous, most sensational voices garnering great rewards. You know this, financial rewards and other rewards. The state of our social media ecosystem could be taken to suggest that political institutions are on the verge of a catastrophic bifurcation, an inflection point which will cause them either to collapse or give birth to something new. Against the backdrop of this turbulent ecosystem, we witnessed Trump's decisive and to some surprising 2024 election victory. Numerous pundits have claimed the president's unassailable win. He definitely says it's unassailable, might be attributed in some substantive way to the campaign's astute and unceasing drumbeat, reminding Gen Z men in particular that he's for you and Kamala's for they, them. And Trump's message, though, could not have succeeded if it hadn't emerged from deep within a well of visceral discontent towards the growing influence of postmodern thought on a wide swath of Western cultural and social institutions. Most notably, and as Canadians, maybe we know this more than anyone, most notably mainstream media and all levels of public education. The Trump campaign recognized that for many of its voters, the left's alphabet functioned as the perfect symbol for their broader resentment against what they perceived as institutional overreach, encroachment upon their freedoms, and an unacceptable attempt to meddle in how they view the world and live their lives. About a decade earlier, Jordan Peterson began his meteoric rise as a public intellectual. taking a prominent and conspicuous stand against Canadian legislation, Bill C-16, which he believed compelled speech by forcing employees of public institutions to refer to students by their chosen pronouns. Now, he was at the University of Toronto. They sent him a letter urging him to comply with their interpretation of the legislation. And we don't know what happened, but well, so the details are kind of murky, but he stopped teaching there soon after. And Peterson's ongoing battle against the influence of postmodern relativism on education and social institutions generally, it could be taken as an early harbinger of Trump's inevitability in the current era. And now we find ourselves at another inflection point. So I wrote this less than a week after the shocking murder of Charlie Kirk. He was a 32-year-old father of two. He was revered by conservative Christians and known for his hardline position against LGBT, or we could say MMIW, 2S plus LGBTQIAA curriculum, medical procedures on minors, and the most pertinent part here is the ontological claim that it is possible for someone to change their sex or their gender. So Kirk's assassin is reported to have been romantically involved with a transgender individual. I think that's confirmed now, who, according to investigators, was cooperating fully at the time. Um, I I don't know if there's a confirmed motive. I actually think there was. I think some of this has come out. We all kind of remember the story, at least vaguely in our minds. Um, so what did I say here? Undoubtedly, um, people in the trans community who had nothing to do with the heinous act are living in fear of violent backlash, or were. And this story continue, the aftermath of this story, I think, continues to unfold in the culture today. Kirk's death leaves his family, his wife Erica, and two children shattered. And so I continue to pray for solace for all of his loved ones. I pray for their comfort and eventually a return of joy to their lives. And I pray for safety for the trans community and for all caught in this fracture. One tragedy is enough. So, through the course of what strikes me as an eerily widespread and effusive hagiography of Kirk following his passing, it was just remarkably intense. Conservative lamenters have frequently insisted or implied that he was a principled champion of free speech who attacked arguments rather than groups of people. This turns out not to be true, at least in my reading of his public statements. For instance, in a January 2025 post on X, Kirk endorsed a Trump executive order banning trans service members, stating, "People battling severe mental illness have no place in the military. Get them help and out of the armed forces." And just weeks later, he responded to a U.S. Army announcement banning transgender individuals from military service, writing, "Mentally ill people need medical treatment and support, not positions of authority in our military. If they ever overcome their gender dysphoria, I'm sure they can reapply to join our armed forces." So what do I want to say a little bit about this? Because and I'll get into this in the essay a bit, but there's just more that I've become aware of. So one of the things is, I'm not sure if I think he was attacking groups of people when I said that. I do really appreciate his principled stand for free speech. Maybe he just actually believed that, and I think we need to. I prefer to live in a world where people just have a right to say what they believe, even if it seems a little bit cruel or harsh. So I don't know exactly what to make about everything about Charlie Kirk these days, but I want to say that. I'll get back to the essay and then maybe I'll comment some more after. So, numerous other social media influencers have repeatedly hammered out similar mentally ill refrains with less restraint, intelligence, or nuance than Kirk managed even in his worst moments, as instantiated above. Now, here's another thing, is that I don't know if it's just my algorithm or if there's something culturally that has shifted since Kirk's murder, but I see I see a lot of social media influencers using this kind of social media mentally ill um, stuff around trans people and now even gay people. I see influencers making these like what they think of as sophisticated arguments that being gay actually is a sin, and they're quite bold in saying that these days. I think it's a little weak and a little petty, and certainly not as clever as they think. And maybe I'll talk about that in another essay someday. But it does seem like there's this growing idea that is snowballing that actually being trans is mentally ill. And I'll have a lot to say about that in the rest of this essay. So, so Kirk's worst moments were instantiated in those quotes above. And yet it's easy to see how Kirk, a personality with unparalleled influence connected to power at the highest levels, might have encouraged and shaped their views. Recognizing all these influencers, including Kirk, are trained on social media algorithms that reward sensational and inflammatory posts, I've often attempted to interpret their statements charitably. I've said to myself that perhaps they don't actually think people who color outside gender lines are mentally ill. After all, if they're like me, they might suspect that postmodern relativism is the real illness. Perhaps they view the claim that objective truths don't exist as a corrosive idea that could cause people and institutions to rot from the inside out. And they might take the idea that reality is reducible to language. The implication being that you could be anything you want just by saying so, and then legislating people into agreeing with you. They might take that not as simply bad philosophy, but as a terrible disease. I do. So I could understand if they did. That part I could get is mentally ill. And if that were the issue, I would find little to quarrel with them about. But it's hard to conceive that Kirk would have been thinking that way based on his above posts. Perhaps he and others have unconsciously blurred the edges between postmodern relativism and what it means to be transgender, collapsing them into a single phenomenon. It is quite easy to imagine how this could happen in the context of our modern discursive landscape, where support for the trans community has increasingly been framed using methods and ideas connected to critical theory and cultural Marxism for decades. Take a sip of water. Okay, so support for trans community has increasingly been framed using the methods and ideas connected to critical theory and cultural Marxism for decades. But that is a speculative and creative explanation. It's not really a serious one. It just isn't the simplest or most profound way of interpreting what's going on in those posts. So to my mind, it's apparent that Kirk meant what he said. I can't help but wonder, had there been a way for the version of me born on the Canadian prairies in 1977 to see Kirk's posts as a youth growing up in the 1980s, would they have added to my shame? Would they have compounded my self-hiding as self-protection strategy? Or would have I remained relatively unruffled and instead been motivated to engage Kirk's ideas critically and curiously as part of a broader inquiry, as is the case today? And what about the version of me being born who, could have been born somewhere along the coast near Santa Cruz, let's say in 1997? Would that person, and let's imagine her as trans, it's definitely possible that she would have been, would she been bothered by all the hatred and prejudice she sees on social media? Or would she find solace in the idea that while you cannot stop hatred and prejudice from existing, you can always orient yourself to live in a way that reflects freedom, courage, and truth. And these are things that nobody, no how, can ever take away from you, no matter what. So I know what I would hope for each of those selves. Yet it's clear to me that to a large degree, their capacity, those selves' or capacity to respond to incendiary social commentary, Challenging their sanity, their worthiness, their right to exist would be shaped by their immediate community, probably more than anything. Those closest to them, those with who they share meals and rituals and harvests and hardships and dreams. So, to illustrate this point, let's imagine a third version of me, one born to pre colonial Navajo parents and recognized by elders in my youth as Nádleehí. Nádleehí, I think I said that right. So, this is sometimes translated as one who changes or one who is transformed. Those elders, having observed my personality, behavior, and dreams all gravitating towards the feminine, would have seen me as a carrier of hoso, balance, and guided me towards service in roles that drew on my talents. As an adult, I might have been called upon to hold rituals, perform as a storyteller, mediate between disputing parties, weave cosmologically significant artifacts, and aid in restoring beauty and balance to situations that had deteriorated into disorder. These are examples of the types of contributions my kin might have known and expected of me. And yes, by the way, when required, I might also have been called to defend my people in battle. Now imagine that this Nádleehí version of me had somehow gotten wind of Kirk's mentally ill posts and been able to read them. Would I not have roared in laughter with the rest of my tribe, thinking that he was the one who sounded mentally unwell? Drawing on the Nádleehí, the Hijra of Hindu tradition, the Fafaf, another one that's hard to pronounce, Fafafini of Samoa, and other anciently rooted anomalous gender archetypes that bear witness to the Creator having salted the world with rare individuals possessing uncommon traits since time immemorial, we can begin to imagine a healthier way forward. This starts with an acknowledgement that the world is bigger than us and more mysterious than we can comprehend. Yet this incomprehensible world contains truth which doesn't bend. And in order to live successfully, we need to orient every aspect of our being, including our politics, our science, and our identity, towards what is really real and really true. Not only what we might wish to be true. We cannot afford to treat this question of what is really real lightly. Now, at the same time, and rather paradoxically, reality is categorically and unflinchingly constructed. The limited slice of the world that shows up in our experience has already been filtered for relevance by our sensory motor system before we even make the first contact, take the first whiff of it. An overwhelming number of stimuli gets parsed down to a pragmatic and manageable fraction of what we could be paying attention to. And this process is not just biological, our values, our purpose, cultural situatedness, not to mention the deep structural manner in which language shapes the emergence of the whole enchilada, acts recursively on our nervous system to again filter what we pay attention to and then continues acting on our experience as an invisible framework that organizes how we make meaning of it all. So all of this should give us pause. The world demands deep epistemic humility in how we judge others, what we consider possible, and the generalizations we might be tempted to make about what constitutes a worthy existence. Consider the extraordinary life of entrepreneurial colossus Martine Rothblatt. Her astonishing list of achievements includes proving the market for civilian GPS applications as the founder of Geostar, revolutionizing audio entertainment as the founder of SiriusXM, and breaking the global satellite communications monopoly as the founder of PanAmSat. And lest we forget, she founded a biotech company where she remains active as CEO that has successfully developed and commercialized numerous treatments for a rare and incurable illness, saving thousands of lives, including her own daughters. And in 2017, she appeared on Forbes' list of the 100 greatest living business minds of the past 100 years. I would put her there. So with an estimated net worth of over 330 million, which seems low to me, but anyway, Rothblatt was in 2014 notably ranked as the highest paid female CEO in the USA, although she has noted publicly that she believes this attribution is not fair to other women given that she is trans. In addition to her bachelor's degree in communications, she holds a law degree, an MBA, and a PhD in medical ethics. And to top it all off, she is a licensed helicopter pilot. Does this sound like someone who's mentally ill to you? Could anyone in their right mind question her contributions to society? Or how about the Wachowskis, whose 1999 four-time Oscar-winning science fiction masterpiece, The Matrix, which perhaps you've heard of, altered the trajectory of filmmaking overnight. I still remember sitting in the theater. I was in university. I smoked a joint and went in to watch this movie. And I sat there and sensed that I was about to witness something profound and life changing the moment those strange blocks of green letters and symbols appeared on the screen. And I wasn't wrong. Although both the sisters have more or less preferred to maintain private personal lives since transitioning, Lana came out in 2012, citing her responsibility to trans youth, and Lily came out in 2016, remarking that she was one of the lucky ones with the support of her family and the means to afford doctors. Their combined filmography includes several highly original and critically acclaimed works: Bound, V for Vendetta, Sense8, The Animatrix, to name a few. Do these exceptionally accomplished, hardworking, groundbreaking artists sound tragically in need of help to you? So I could name others. There are many who could be named. But you can see where I'm going with this. So let's get to the point. Do I think it's possible for someone to change their sex or their gender? No, not really. It depends what you mean, I guess. Gender seems to be socially constructed. And so I don't think it's something that you can perform in isolation or that you can force people to agree with you about. So, regardless of the issue, and regardless of that issue, critical and constructivist attitudes towards gender are frequently posited in a way that detaches the social sciences from the life sciences. And so we de-emphasize the life sciences, and then you end up making these ontological claims that, like, just any way you look at it from my perspective, are irresponsible. But to be frank, either way, it's not a very interesting question to me, and nor should my opinion matter that much. Do I believe we need to talk about people who menstruate or act as if men can have babies in order to protect rights and feelings? No. Such, like, this is Orwellian language in my mind. And I think it, speaking to the original purpose of this essay, it erodes truth, it erodes trust, and it erodes shared commitment. And these are pillars of social well-being. So to my mind, it's counterproductive. Do I think that biological men have a right to participate in women's sports? Not unless they are welcomed on the field by women, as some are, but generally no. Do I think that mandating gender affirming curricula or pronouns or barring teachers from discussing gender with parents help society? No, it's problematic and it undermines trust. So when a Nádleehí, sorry, when a Nádleehí-esque student shows up in the world, let's hope that adults in that student's life can see what's in front of their eyes and meet them with wisdom and presence and grace. But trying to legislate wisdom and grace is a fool's errand. A better option is striving to build communities upon solid principles like truth and trust and sacred commitment. And granted, it's not obvious always or even most of the time how to do that. But what is obvious is that coercing parents against their convictions destroys communities. Little sip of water. So, what should we do then? We should recognize that creation is a mysterious thing. We should peer deep into the microscope, and we should see how sex chromosomes sometimes blur the XXXY divide. And you have intersex variability. You've got XXY chromosomes. You've got, all kinds of hormone receptors not functioning. There's lots of things that don't fit into our two uh, poles of gender biologically. And it's contested what this all means, how much percentage of births it is, but there's fuzziness. So consider how theories of distinct brain configurations suggest that trans minds, like Rothblatt's, for example, she's a great example, or the Wachowskis, might spark meteoric creativity. And then pay attention to what's really real. Yes, there are practically only two genders. The human template is dimorphic. It's just the way it is. But you know what? There's also a surprising amount of blurriness around the edges. People are not all the same. A portion of the population seem to bend and transcend our commonly accepted ideas about gender. Many of these people are shamanically inclined. They are creative storytellers and healers. They bring deep insight into the human condition, informed by an outsider's perspective, which is so valuable. So let's make sure that they, maybe we, are in a position to give their or our gifts. And that will help create stronger communities, families, and civilizations.